By Mark Cuban, who's trying to heckle the last interview. Would you yell fake facts?
Yeah, alternative facts.
Got in here. Alternative facts. Did you see the president's press conference yesterday?
Yes, I did.
Your thoughts?
That's Donald Trump. I didn't expect anything less. Very entertaining.
I just wondered if you had some note. Like, it seems like the White House has captured everyone's attention, and
That's an understatement. Look, he is who he is. Would I hire him to run a company for me? No. But he's our president. I think, as much as I've picked on him, let me go through the list of the positives first, and then we can torch him. One, he's changing the SEC. I was a critic of Obama's SEC. I said a lot publicly that I was a critic of Obama's SEC. I think it was a mess. POR is now running it. Hopefully they'll keep him there. He's got a good sense, and hopefully they'll introduce bright line regulations so people know what you can and can't do when it comes to trading and other things. I think what he's doing with the FCC, I know it's not popular in Silicon Valley, but I've been anti-net neutrality since 2005. I think the internet works, and introducing regulation isn't going to make it any more open or free, and could stifle innovation on the internet. I like what he's attempting to do with taxes, whether or not, now maybe not to the extreme, and I don't think he'll get 20% even for corporate or personal taxes, but I think reducing the amount of paperwork and administrivia involved reduces everybody's costs in doing so. So I think that's a positive. I think what he's doing with lobbyists, when you said, you can't become a lobbyist if you've worked for the government, I think that's great. I think it's great for everybody. I think reducing regulations. If you said, okay, Mark, if you were a politician, what's one of the first things you would do? I'd reduce the amount of regulation. There's just, we don't need 75,000 pages or whatever it is. So I think, whether or not all these things get passed or how they're implemented and executed, that's always a challenge. But I don't want everybody to think, well, I'm just a full-time critic and I don't recognize some of the positive things that they've done, particularly when it comes from a business perspective. I think there's some conservative Republican concepts that I, as an independent, can't agree with. Now, the devil's in the details, and then you've got to be able to get them passed, and we'll see whether or not he does that.
But things you're critical of, you said?
No, stuff I torch him over, right? What he's doing socially, immigration, the EPA, who knows what's real and what's not, rounding up immigrants that are legally here. I think his implementation and execution of stuff is severely lacking, and I don't think they're thought through. But I think the bigger overriding, and there's 10 other things I can go through on that list, but I think the bigger overriding problem is in terms of leadership and management and personal issues for him. I don't think he's a leader. I think what people tend to forget now is that now that he's won the election, he's the president, he is also the commander-in-chief. And he's also in charge of the federal government. That's 4 million plus employees. Everything he says, everything he does, when he does the press conference yesterday, he's not only talking to the media, he's not only talking to the people who voted for him, he's talking to 4 million plus employees. He's speaking as the commander-in-chief to the military. And so when you do that, you have to come across as a leader. You have to show leadership qualities. And in order to show leadership qualities, you have to be able to admit a mistake. Right? Because I think one of the reasons that we're seeing leaks and so many problems from the intelligence community and from a staff for non-intelligence issues, if the guy in charge or the woman in charge does not admit or acknowledge mistakes, well, everybody that works for you, they see the mistake, they see the problem, and if the top person isn't accepting the responsibility, where's that responsibility going to fall? On one of them. And so knowing that they're going to get the blame, they're leaking to CYA their own asses, right? And so I think that's a symptom of his lack of leadership problems. I think, the way, the personal issues, there's no self-accountability.
His own personal personality, you mean? Not
even his personality. One-to-one, he's a good guy, right? You sit there and talk to Donald Trump, you talk to him on the phone, he's personable, he's nice, he'll listen. I never had any problem talking with him. But when it comes time to discuss specific issues and to be the CEO of the United States, he's running as a business guy, he's running as a CEO. He's not showing any CEO leadership qualities that I think, or at least that I think, are important. You have to be self-aware. You have to know what you know and know what you don't know. You have to be contextually aware, situationally aware. So when he goes after John Lewis, Rep. Lewis during Martin Luther King, it's weekend, birthday weekend, that's craziness. When he's having a press conference with the Prime Minister of Israel, and he starts talking, or Canada for that matter, and he starts talking about how he won the election and his electoral vote count, and those types of things. That shows a significant lack of situational awareness, and that's exemplified in other areas as well. He makes no effort to learn. It's like in his press conference yesterday, it was obvious when he talked about, well, people read newspapers. They watch TV, right? They listen to TV. It's obvious he's an analog guy through and through. He,
famously doesn't use email.
Not only does he not use email, famously not use email, and I know from personal experience, he doesn't use a search engine. How could you not use a search engine just to learn? And it's evidenced in the examples he gives, and it's evidenced in his lack of awareness of what's going on around him. There's no CEO in the history of CEOs that can be successful without making an effort to learn. And there's nothing.
You don't think he's been successful?
Well, it's too early to gauge.
No, I mean in other aspects of his life, right? Because people have voted for him, people look at him, and he himself makes the argument, I've been successful in business, I'll be successful as this other thing.
I mean, he's made a lot of money,
yeah.
Right? I remember having a conversation with him, and I brought up real estate examples, limited, thinking he's going to just go blow right by me. And it didn't resonate with him, right? So it's just like doing a spreadsheet for a real estate investment, It didn't resonate with him at all. Being smart and making a lot of money, as a lot of people have accused me, don't necessarily go hand in hand, right? But I do think that if the only certainty about being the president of the United States is the uncertainty. You don't know what's coming next. And you've got to make an effort to always be learning, and you've got to make an effort to have at your disposal every possible tool, which this day and age includes technology. And I think that lack of understanding, of grasp of any technology whatsoever is hurting him in his approach. And I'll give you the perfect example, jobs.
Okay.
Right? There's, from the most basic common sense perspective, how could it ever possibly be wrong for the President of the United States to sit down with the CEO of any company, particularly an industrial company,
right,
and convince them to build a factory and to hire people in that factory? And on a micromanaged basis, it's impossible to see anything wrong. On a macro basis, when you ask yourself what actually is going to happen in that factory, what technologies are they going to use, what is that going to gear them towards, unless you understand how the nature of work is changing and how this acceleration of technological change is changing
away from manufacturing towards the jobs.
Not just manufacturing, right? How we process information, how we automate automation. The point being that I'd be willing to bet every single one of these companies that are building these factories, those factories, and they still should do them, right? And I think indirectly he's benefiting those companies on a macro basis, but from the macro basis for the whole country, benefiting those companies, but on the macro basis for the whole country, every one of those companies that are going to be building new factories, their net employment is going to be lower once those factories are built than he even anticipates.
The new factories will have robots where they had humans in the past.
And they're just pushing them towards further automation, right? And further use of deep learning, machine learning, et cetera, right? It's inevitable. He couldn't stop it. But the problem I'm having with it is he doesn't understand the macro issues. He thinks he's creating more jobs when in essence that's not happening. And so where we're going to be as a country is that we're going to have a lot of displaced workers. The nature of work is changing. And it's not just going to be factory workers who are displaced. It's going to be people that...
And you see that in the long-term employment statistics. You see the decline of manufacturing jobs going back decades, not just a couple of years, not just pre or post NAFTA.
You and I have been talking technology for 15, 20 years, right?
You just called me old, I got that.
Yeah, I'm calling us both old, right? Or better, we're not old.
That's it.
The amount of change we're going to see over the next 5 years, 10 years, will dwarf everything that's happened over the last 30. We went from automating pen and paper, right, with spreadsheets, to connecting PCs into local area networks, to
Right. Connecting them.
Connecting people
To each
locally,
other.
locally, right, to connecting networks to get the internet, to getting the network effect of communicating people globally and allowing that communicating, getting that productivity.
And that really starts to happen about 2098, 2000, right in there, when the internet suddenly is getting into people's homes.
Blast off, and
high
then
speed.
we get to Facebook in 2004, all the network effect to people, right, and to the Slacks and everything, the network effect in business, the Salesforce.com. But now we're introducing artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, et cetera. So, and what that enables is the automation of automation, right? And so the people who were writing software, particularly at the lower end, unless you're doing
Right.
these advanced things, they're gone, right? The people that would
Because the software's writing itself. It's
doing itself, right? It's just math. Right? All the people doing basketball analytics and saying, okay, we're going to, this is what you do in this situation. Well, you can't anticipate, you can't look at every possible iteration. People can't do that. There aren't enough people, there's not enough time. Machine learning can look at every possible and consider every possible situation.
So the notion is it looks at the statistics of the shots, looks at where the players were, looks at what happened in the last 3 games, and can play chess against it and see the reaction.
A programmer back in the day, so when I was writing code, it was the algorithms were if this, then that.
Right.
X or whatever it may be.
Right.
But you had to guess. Right? You had to use your best instance. And then it got smarter and smarter and smarter, and libraries to do bigger and better things. All that is being automated. And so now you have to know how to use that stuff. So either software works for you or you work for software, and once the software takes over, you're gone. Right? So unless you understand that, you don't understand that the nature of work is changing, the nature of employment is going to change, and from a business, from a stock perspective. If you're in the Fortune 500, if you're an S&P 500 company, if you're in the Dow 30, right, if you're one of the bigger companies, you already know this. And in talking to a lot of these big companies, they know their workforces, and given the supply and demand of stocks, the supply is shrinking,
right,
and the demand is going up just as the economy grows. That's probably good news for stocks over the long term, but it's bad news for employment, and it's bad news for people who are disrupted.
Well, and that's part of the thing, right? Is that there's a time when GM was the largest employer, and the companies like GM was what employment looked like. If Facebook's what it looks like, the revenue per employee at Facebook is infinitely larger than any automaker could ever make, or any manufacturer could make.
The difference is the time lag, right? The timeline. So what took 20 years before and then became 10 could be 5 or 3. And so when you start getting that massive amount of disruption in employment, what do? That's the whole thing he ran on, right? We're going to get you jobs. And if you last 4 years, right, the whole nature of employment is going to change. There aren't manufacturing jobs coming back. There aren't more coal mining jobs coming back. No matter what you do to the EPA, a lot of these jobs are going to be gone. Now, there's still physical things. If you do infrastructure, you can kind of, buy some time, right, spend more, get temporary jobs to build roads, build bridges, which is all fine and good, right? I think you can get a return on much of those things. But you're going to have to recognize that there are going to be more people out of work. So,
through this innovation.
Yeah.
So essentially what you make the case for is education and job training for grown-ups.
No.
No?
No, I think that won't matter, right? What are you going to go back and learn to do?
What it takes, right? I mean, whether it's finance, whether it's software programming.
Finance, that's the easiest thing. You just take the data and have it spit out whatever you need. Right? I personally think there's going to be a greater demand in 10 years for liberal arts majors than there were for programming majors, and maybe even engineering, because when the data is all being spit out for you, options are being spit out for you, you need a different perspective in order to have a different view of the data. And so having somebody who's more of a freer thinker, and because if automation is being automated, you just learn the tax rules. You just feed the automation the tax rules, and it does the rest for you.
So English majors of the world should celebrate?
I think English, philosophy, foreign language majors, maybe not now, they're going to starve for a while, but that's not even the real issue, right? The real issue is if 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 5 million people have their jobs disrupted, and we see the direction everything is going and how quickly it's going. What are you going to do with them? right? And so what I've said to the administration, and I've volunteered to help, and look, I've told his assistant, not President Trump directly, I've told people around him, I told people I know, look, I may disagree with 99% of what the guy does and how he does it, but I'm an American citizen first and last, and so I'll help wherever I can, and I want him to be successful. But what I've told them and have repeated multiple times is there's a program called AmeriCorps, right? And AmeriCorps right now has a year of service, and it pays kids, $12,000, and they go do socially impactful things, but they live 9 people in a house, right? And that's how they're able to afford it. That's not going to cut it anymore. Those same programs, instead of having a $1.2 billion budget, needs to be a $15 or $20 billion budget, and that amount needs to be $30,000 a year. And that displaced worker in Beattyville, Kentucky, can go around teaching kids to read as part of the AmeriCorps program, and there can be 20 in Beattyville, there can be 1 million in New York City, or New York State, whatever it may be, and that's what they're doing, right? They're going out and having a social impact. It's almost like the Tennessee Valley Authority, where there was make work and building
WPA
a dam.
programs.
Yeah.
Because AmeriCorps it was closely modeled on Peace Corps, right? Same idea,
but for domestic, right. But having people come in and have a social impact and making it a real job, like you said, the WPA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, right? That's what we're going to need, and he doesn't see that. And so if you don't start, maybe he'll learn it. Maybe maybe I don't know what's going on, and maybe I'm misevaluating his ability to absorb this stuff.
Well, make America great again. Make America great. Something it isn't necessarily backwards looking. Make it great again is.
Yeah, but deal with the issues. Regardless of how you want to brand it, you got to deal with the issues, and the issues are the nature of work is changing. Automation is being automated. What looked like a great job graduating from college today may not be a great job graduating from college 5 years or 10 years from now. Having had a great job programming for the last 15 years, being a Python expert and integrating to this and that, might have been a great job for those 15 years. You might be out of work in 5 years. And I know I'm being kind of fatalistic on this, and hopefully I'm wrong, but in the event that there's a greater than 0% chance I'm right, somebody's got to start dealing with this stuff and recognize it and dealing with the macro issues. And to me, it's one of the most critical issues from a job perspective that we face, and he just doesn't get it.
Do you think we saw anything different from the last president?
Yeah, I mean, look, they came out with a paper saying a lot of these same things. And so, yeah, I mean, look, for all President Obama's faults, at least he made the effort to learn. I mean, when he first came out, when Obama was first elected, I was tearing him apart. I was tearing him apart on the SEC, what he was doing for entrepreneurs or lack thereof, the fact that it seemed to be that everything got tougher for entrepreneurs and business. And you can go back in my blog, and I had no problems tearing him apart, just like I have no problems now. But to Obama's credit, he brought me in, even though I was being chased by the SEC, and he didn't commit to do anything and didn't change anything, but at least he listened, and he responded in a manner that made me think he understood. And he also brought in not just me, but tech guy after tech guy after tech guy to try to understand all these things.
Well, Megyn Kelly was there in the White House.
Megyn Kelly.
Straight out when someone you know
Megyn Smith,
a long time.
Megyn Smith,
sorry.
yeah.
Megyn Smith there from Google, someone
Brilliant,
we both know really
brilliant
well.
woman, right? And she's way ahead of the curve, right? And they were all very clear that this was a coming problem. Now, did he come up with a solution? No. Did he come up with a paper? Yes. Now, one, is not any better than the other, but at least it was there. And I don't get the sense from looking at President Trump that these have even crossed his mind. I have yet to have somebody say to me, you know what? He's been able to go in depth and convey a deep understanding of A, B, or C. Superficial, headline porn, right? I'm great, self-promotion, yeah, but at some point you got to, and I said this to him directly, at some point you have to learn the issues and you have to have the ability to convey an understanding, because that builds confidence around you.
What was your line to me a few months ago? It was rare in public life you see someone get stupider over time.
Right, yeah. And
I'm just quoting you.
Yeah, and stupider is actually a word just to, yeah, because he got so, when I would talk to Donald Trump on the phone at the beginning, not one time did he say, we're starting a movement. Not one time did he say, there's a groundswell. I feel it. I'm going in this direction. It was like, we'll see what happens, right? But what he did say that I give him credit for in our discussions, I asked him about ground game and execution of things. He goes, I got the evangelicals. The evangelicals are doing all that for me. And it turns out he did. That won him the election. So he was a lot smarter than I was in realizing the importance of the evangelicals to his success.
So when you look at this, there's also a lot of news right now. New York Times had this story saying that there's a lot of contact with the campaign. They didn't mention you, contact with the campaign. No, they mentioned contact with the campaign with Russians. And I wonder, the Mike Flynn story has unfolded, but there seems to be an investigation continuing. I wonder what you think about that.
I mean, I'm curious about it. I don't make it out. It's scary in a lot of respects just because of all the intersections. What's scary about it is when you look at all the information available, you see all these connecting data points, and there's no transparency. So the scary part is we don't know. The good news of all that is it's going to be impossible to lift sanctions now, right? Because if he does anything to benefit Russia at all, it's going to be over the top obvious that something's going around, at least perceived that way. And so on one hand, I'm curious like everybody else. We'll see. I hope there's an investigation. I wish he was transparent just to say, hey, take a look, here's the transcript.
Like a special prosecutor or something.
Yeah, go look at it. What have I got to hide? Take a look, right? That's just not his nature. He just thinks, he's paranoid about everything. And again, if you're paranoid about everything, that's not being a leader, particularly when you're commander-in-chief. You can't be paranoid about of anybody in the entire universe. The one person with all the assets, all the manpower, all the brain power, all the piss and vinegar that this country, amazing country has, he has it at his disposal. He should be the least paranoid person in the world because he gets access to everything. And so to me, that's an issue with him as opposed to the bigger picture. Because, just a little bit of transparency, a little bit of confidence. Take a look. What have I got to hide?